Bruce Lee held disdain for the past of martial arts, believing it needed to evolve and become fluid. Many in the world of MMA would say traditional martial arts are dead, but millions still practice what Bruce called a classical mess. Those on his side will point to forms as an example of this. But forms do change. Should they though? Should they actually look like this? Or does the change need to go further? Is the traditional approach the best way, or are new versions of things always better? Was Bruce Lee right about the classical mess? Let's find out. One of my big interests is using Kung Fu and modern sports science to get the most out of training, building a healthy, long-lasting body and improving as much as possible as a martial artist. But should we incorporate the traditional? Recently, I've been talking to some of my clients about the relative benefits of modern versus traditional interpretations of forms. Probably every form has undergone change since it was created. Do we lose the original intent and meaning of a form by changing it, diluting its usefulness until it's nothing but a dance? Or do new approaches and modifications allow us to supplement our forms with newfound knowledge and make them even more effective? The debate of old versus new is a perennial one. Now, it can't be denied that development in martial arts over the 20th and 21st century has led to some very effective forms of fighting, and perhaps more importantly, training for fighting. Arguably, much of the hype in recent years around the exposure of fake kung fu masters in the ring says more about their training for a fight than the combat effectiveness of any particular style. Jesse Enkamp has talked about not hiding behind traditional approaches and embracing modern training techniques. We don't have to stand for an hour in Mabu just because our predecessors did. Once we're comfortable with the position, we can develop strength and endurance more effectively with weighted squats. But on the other hand, the modernization of karate, when it was taken to Japan, led to the use of much lower and larger stances than had traditionally been used, and a reduction in the understanding of bunkai. These examples show how modernization can have very different effects, either diluting the combat intent of training or enhancing its effectiveness. So how traditional should we go with our martial arts? Do we go right back to the start, or do we let the past die?
Let the past die. Kill it, if you have to.
I think we can all agree Kylo Ren is not the best role model, but times have moved on. When he and Bruce Lee agree, shouldn't we listen? Even if just for our own safety? Here's where I think we should be. Our understanding of the human body and how to improve it have changed dramatically in the last 100 years. We shouldn't ignore that. We can construct a training program using the latest science and endurance, strength and flexibility, but still keep the holistic approach of traditional practices. Now, I love forms. I think they're interesting, fun, and have genuine value in teaching you how to move and basic fighting strategies. If you can, I think you should even learn different versions of the same form. Yes, it can get confusing, but it can also unlock greater insights. This is especially true if you can find traditional versions to learn. If nothing else, it's an interesting aspect of martial arts culture to preserve, but you can also discover new applications which you'll never learn in a modern kickboxing or MMA style class. You just need to make sure that you train them against a resisting opponent, and then they come back to life. When comparing different versions, consider why each move is the way it is, and why things have been changed. Do the applications work? Is one more practical than the other? How might these moves be done differently, and do they make sense in terms of body mechanics? And ultimately, which one works for you? You may end up with your own version of the form. There's a hybrid of all the different versions that you know. That's fine. Remember, forms are always evolving. If you can remember each version and why you ended up where you have, that would be perfect. Then, if you ever teach the form to anyone else, they can understand why the form is the way it is, and maybe even find a style that suits them. Ultimately, that's what Bruce Lee was driving for. Each of us finding our own best way, keeping what is useful and discarding what is not. I still think there's value in traditional martial arts if we can understand it well enough and learn to apply it. So, what should your training look like? Hopefully you now realize that it shouldn't look like any of this. You should make it your own. Now, if you're struggling with Da Tong Bei Chuan, the form featured heavily in this video, check out this one next to see how you can make it your own and a little bit easier.